Alien Romulus is chock full of callbacks to the series' 45-year history, so much that a few things may have slipped by even diehard fans. These are some of the film's deepest cuts. After directing the original Alien way back in 1979, Ridley Scott returned to the franchise for 2012's Prometheus and 2017's Alien Covenant. Given how divisive those entries were, it's understandable that producers were looking for a fresh take. So while Scott is a producer on Alien Romulus, Fede Álvarez has taken the director's chair. Álvarez is no stranger to the horror genre, as he previously helmed 2013's Evil Dead reboot and Don't Breathe. When examining the filmmaker's resume, a pattern appears to emerge that shows many of his works following the same basic plot. When stripping Romulus, Evil Dead, and Don't Breathe to the barest of bones, they all follow a small cast of characters who become trapped in an isolated location. These characters must fight off a malevolent force, with many dying in the process, but at least one person gets away. All three movies also contain either explicit or metaphorical references to sexual assault. Intentional or not, Álvarez has explored similar ideas across his filmography. He also has writing credits for these three movies, so it would seem these are themes he's concerned with exploring. Since his interests line up with those of the Alien franchise, his previous films are almost undoubtedly what landed him the Romulus gig in the first place.
The whole idea behind this film was to really take it back to basics and make it a pure horror movie again.
Much of Alien Romulus takes place on the Renaissance space station, which contains two modules named Romulus and Remus. The corporation at the center of the franchise, Weyland-Yutani, is heavily influenced by Roman history and mythology, which is precisely where these names come from. Romulus and Remus were brothers. In the myth, Romulus killed Remus, then founded Rome. The concept of sibling rivalry and distrust is at the heart of Alien Romulus. Andy may be a synthetic, but Rain refers to him as her brother. His primary directive at first is to do what's best for Rain no matter what, but his programming receives an upgrade while on the space station, greatly enhancing his intelligence and giving him a new directive to do what's best for Weyland-Yutani. This leads him into direct conflict with Rain, but fortunately they're able to avoid the same outcome as the Roman myth, with Rain rebooting Andy back to his more compassionate programming. The references to Roman mythology don't end there, though. The most well-known image of Romulus and Remus sees them sucking at the teat of their adoptive wolf mother. At the end of Alien Romulus, Kay gives birth to a human xenomorph hybrid, which can later be seen receiving similar nourishment from its mother, killing her in the process. Alien Romulus pays tribute to the entire Alien movie saga, from a digitally resurrected Ian Holm portraying Science Officer Rook to the discovery that the scientists on the Renaissance were experimenting with the black ooze that was a major plot point in Prometheus. However, Fede Álvarez doesn't just honor the film side of things. There's an Easter egg for the 2014 video game, Alien Isolation 2, if you know where to look. Álvarez told the Inside Total Film podcast that he's a big fan of the game, saying he played it a lot as he was waiting for Don't Breathe to come out, thinking at the time,
if I could do anything, I would love to do Alien and kind of scare the audience again with that creature in those environments.
His wish came true eventually, and he honored the game by incorporating the emergency phones that are used as save points. As tends to be the case with video games, a save point generally means you're about to enter an area with a high probability that your character might die. The same concept applies to Romulus, Álvarez said. The movie is set up in a way that every time something bad is about to happen, you will see a phone. The fact that it's an Alien movie means something bad is always around the corner, but it's a neat reference for gamers to keep their eyes peeled and to brace themselves for something gnarly occurring. On board the Renaissance, Rain and her friends discover and reactivate the top half of Science Officer Rook's quasi-functioning body, who provides much of the exposition while he tries to complete his mission of getting the black ooze back to Weyland-Yutani. Alien fans will recognize the visage as that of Ian Holm, who portrayed the android Ash in the first Alien movie. Holm died in 2020, so it's natural for fans to wonder how he's back playing a different synthetic in Alien Romulus.
Human.
Unknown.
In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Álvarez confirmed that although actor Daniel Betts delivered the lines, CGI enhancement and generative AI was used to make the character look and sound more like Holm. There's one thing that tends to happen at the end of Alien movies, and in a broader sense, horror movies in general. Romulus does it too. For some reason, these films' giant monsters are incredibly stealthy and can stow away on a ship without anyone realizing at first. In Alien, Ripley gets onto a shuttle as the Nostromo self-destructs, but a xenomorph is also on board that, so she has to jettison it through an airlock. In Aliens, a small group escapes on a dropship before the main station explodes. They're joined by the Queen, who's hiding in the landing gear. Alien Romulus has its own fake-out ending, with Rain, Kay, and Andy escaping the space station just as it's about to hit the ring surrounding the planet. They think they're in the clear, but a new antagonist manages to stow away in a far more subtle manner than the larger aliens. Kay has injected herself with the black goo, likely believing it would save herself and her baby, but all it does is mutate the embryo to where she gives birth to a pod containing a human-xenomorph hybrid. An Alien movie once again ends with the audience believing that the characters are safe, but there's one more fight ahead of them. From Terminator to Halloween, it's pretty common for certain franchises to simply ignore previous entries that maybe weren't received all that well. As an entirely separate installment from anything that's come before, one might assume Alien Romulus would focus more on honoring Alien and aliens as opposed to something like Prometheus, which had a more mixed reception from critics and audiences. Instead, Romulus includes a nod to something called the Prometheus file in the movie. Rain and her cohorts learn that Weyland-Yutani wishes to harvest the black goo, first introduced in Prometheus, for its own nefarious corporate plans. The goal is to manipulate the ooze so that it helps employees recover from diseases faster and continue working for the company longer. This black ooze was established in the opening scene of Prometheus, where an engineer consumes it. His body breaks apart as he falls over a waterfall, seemingly bringing life to Earth. So far, the compound seems to either kill whatever it comes into contact with or create horrible monsters. Kay, who injects herself with it, winds up giving birth to the latter. Perhaps that is Rook's plan all along, smuggle a monster on board a fleeing ship so that Weyland-Yutani could proceed to experiment on it. One could reasonably argue that Aliens is a sci-fi sequel that's even better than the original, taking the central concept of Alien and giving it the glossy veneer of an action flick with a Vietnam War allegory. It amps up the tension and dread and brings in a host of xenomorphs instead of just one. The basic structure of Alien Romulus is similar to Alien, as far as being primarily stuck in one location, but the film still manages to reference the James Cameron-directed sequel in more ways than one. The humans can't do much against xenomorphs in hand-to-hand combat, so Rain gets outfitted with an F-44A pulse rifle. Tyler even shows her how to use the lock-on feature and arm support for maximum efficiency. There's even a reference to this rifle being the same type used by colonial Marines, calling to mind the team Ripley joins in Aliens. Granted, it's not the exact same rifle. The weapon of choice in Aliens is technically an M41A pulse rifle, so it makes sense that the two would be different to a degree. Also, Alien Romulus takes place in the year 2142, while Aliens occurs in 2179. Think about how far technology has come over the course of 30 years in the real world. Firearms would definitely be upgraded throughout that time, but it's clear Rain's pulse rifle is meant to call the Marines to mind. Other than its amazing action, Aliens is also known for having quite a few quotable lines.
Game over, man! It's game over!
But the most iconic one-liner might just belong to Ripley, who gets into a P-5000-powered workloader to save Newt from the Queen.
Get away from her, you.
The events of Aliens haven't even occurred by the time Alien Romulus takes place, but apparently that's a pretty common line in this universe, as Andy saves Rain from an encroaching xenomorph and says the exact same thing. Callback lines are to be expected in any sequel to a major franchise. Deadpool and Wolverine leaned into this heavily, with Blade saying his infamous line from the first Blade movie.
Some always trying to ice skate uphill.
It's generally good for making the audience cheer, but one does have to wonder how the line makes sense within the film's context. It seems as though the line may have been a step too far for some, as one Redditor commented in an Alien Romulus thread. The fan service lines were cute and all, but actually detract a bit because it makes the movie come off as derivative and a fan movie. It was a bit on the nose. Throughout the Alien Romulus press tour, Fede Álvarez has been outspoken about wanting to use as many practical effects as possible. The filmmaker told The Hollywood Reporter, "What's important to me is what I think is important for the audience, and I think the masses out there in the audience that love these movies particularly, they really prefer to see the practical effects." To make that happen, the team collaborated with Tippett's studio for a specific moment. Phil Tippett is a master of practical effects, and his studio has worked on the biggest franchises around, from Star Wars to Jurassic Park. For Alien Romulus, the team was enlisted to create an effect involving a lab rat that dies but then regenerates. That sequence was achieved through stop-motion animation, which has been a specialty of the studio. A rodent was far from the studio's only practical effect, as the team also designed xenomorph puppets the actors could perform with. Kaylee Spaney spoke with the news movement about how exciting that was. Actually acting off of it was quite terrifying. Such an amazing honor, you know, getting to act against that instead of a green screen or a tennis ball. Alien Romulus has numerous references to previous Alien movies, even channeling a bit of Alien Resurrection with the introduction of the human xenomorph Offspring in the finale. Kay gives birth to a creature that rapidly matures into a bipedal entity that has aspects of a xenomorph but is somewhat human in appearance. In fact, looking at its pasty white skin and dark eyes, it almost looks like an engineer from Prometheus. The exact biological mechanics of what happens in the ending of Romulus are up in the air, but when Kay injects herself with the black compound, it likely fuses with the DNA within her embryo. This expedites the reproduction cycle, so she gives birth right then and there, and we're left with a creature that probably has both xenomorph and human DNA. But why does it look like an engineer instead of having Kay's characteristics? Prometheus likely holds the answers, as the film's beginning shows an engineer sacrifice itself to create life on Earth. Through subsequent evolution, one can surmise that all humans hold at least part of the genetic structure of engineers. Therefore, the black substance may reawaken that part of humanity's DNA within Kay's womb, resulting in a monstrosity that's sure to haunt people's nightmares.